Saphinde satheleka thina siniphathele lona ilungelo lakho, it's your right. Mbukeli sisakaza bukhoma la kumahamba phambili SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. Isifikile ke intokazi yakwaJali Alisha, ngithi sanibonani nonke emakhaya. Yithi nginikhumbuza ukuthi phela ekuhambeni kohlelo sizonipha nani ithuba lokubeka imbono yenu noma nisibuze imibuzo. Izingcingo zethu la e-studio ayikakashintshi, zithi 0117146918, uzame futhi ku 0117146919. Uma ufuna ukusithumela i-email consumer@sabc.co.za. Satholakala futhi ku Facebook na ku Twitter. Asihlale phezu kwendaba. Now, until about a decade ago, building your own home was cheaper than buying an existing property. Before 2007, building your dream home was not only cost-effective, but also brought the consumer sentimental value, with everything brand new in the house and according to one's specification and taste as well as style. But recently, the rising cost of building material and a host of other requirements has made buying an existing home cheaper than building from scratch. But whichever option one takes, consumers are advised to do their homework before deciding what option will suit them best. Asizwe laba bathini.
Ngabe ukuthenga indlu evele isakhiwe kungcono kunokuba uzakhele indlu yakho okade uphupha ngayo. Yilokho ke abathengi ababuzana khona uma sebethatha isinqumo uma sebefuna ukuba nemizi yabo. Kuningi ke okumele bekucabangisise kahle, njengenani lomuzi, isitayela sawo kanye nokuthi uzokugculisa na. Ukuzakhela umuzi wakho kuqonda ukuthi konke kumele kube kushasha. Sukela kwisakhiwo sakhona kumele kube sesimanje manje. Ukhaphethi noma ama-tiles amasha, amapayipi amanzi amasha kanye nezinto eziningi. Noma ukhetha ukuzakhela noma ukuthenga umuzi osowakhiwe, lesi akusona isinqumo esilula neze neze.
Cha, mina ngiyafisa ukuthi ngizithengele indawo, ngizakhele umuzi, ngizohlala nefamily yami khona ngoba ibangcono ibankulu ngoba bangithenga siyakhiwe nemali khona ibaningi kakhulu.
Buy a new house that's already built, because to get a building plan approved, there's a lot of schlep and a lot of costs involved to do that.
Some houses we njalo, uyithola incane ama-room akhona mancane, and then le ngizakhela yona, it's going to be much bigger, kuzoba into engiyifunayo, and then nanoma if I can pay more, but it's something engiyifunayo.
It's always better for you to ukuthi uzithengele indlu engeyakho and then uyakhe ube nama problems angawakho, kunokuthi uthole indlu eveli ike yahlala omunye umuntu and then uthole ukuthi yena umuntu wakhona ube nama problems nayo indlu yakhona, and then you cover up ama problems omunye umuntu.
Kodwa ukuzakhela nakhona kunezingqinamba zakhona njengalezi. Ukubiza kwezinto zokwakha, ukubiza kokuthola imvumo yesicelo sokwakha ngokusemthethweni, ukulinda isikhathi eside ulinde ukuthi indlu yakho iphele, ukuthatha isikhathi eside kwabahloli bezindlu, ukuthembela kubakhi. Ngalesikhathi usakha usuke usakhokha irent noma ibond lapho usuke uhlala khona ulinde ukuthi indlu yakho iphele. Uma isithatha isikhathi eside ukuphela ugcina ungene kwezinye izindleko. Oyisikhulu se-The Home Builders Registration Council, uCraig Makhaphela, uthi abathengi abaningi abazi nokuthi iziphi iziqeqesho abakhi amele bebe nazo uma sebakha izindlu zabo.
Besides why the law, it's a law that a home builder must be actually registered with the NHBRC, but also in terms of ukuba registered in the NHBRC, it sort of gives a housing consumer a guarantee that the property that is being built, it meets the quality. Remember now, as I said, when e-builders are coming to register with the NHBRC, we actually assess them. We do a technical assessment for builders that are able to read and write, but builders that cannot read and write, we do a verbal assessment with them, a technical, exactly, do they know the rules of actually building, and then do they understand the standards. Basically also they are familiar with the National Home Building Regulations.
Nangoba ukuthenga indlu evele isakhiwe kungeke kubize kangako, kodwa nakhona kunobuhle bakhona kanye nezingqinamba zakhona. Okuhle ukuthi ukungena endlini esiphelele. Esikhathini esiningi ukuthenga indlu evele isikhona iseduzane nezikole, izitolo, izinto zokugibela kanye nokunye abathengi abakudingayo. Indlu esakhiwe ivamisa ukuba ishibhe kunaleyo yokuzakhela. Ukungakhathazeki ngabakhi, ukuthola amaplani kanti nokuhlolwa njalo babahloli bokwakha. Kanti nokuyiqhubeza kancane ukuthi ilingane izidingo zakho angeke kube yinkinga enkulu. Kanti izingqinamba zendlu evele isakhiwe ukuthi ukhokhela imali yama-transfer kanye nemali yokuthi ibond ibe segameni lakho. Kungaba khona okuphukile noma okungahambi kahle, njengamapayipi amanzi, izintambo zikagesi kanye nokunye. Kungadingeka ukuthi ulungise ezinye izinto noma upende kabusha. Isakhiwo sakhona nesitayela kungenzeka ukuthi akusona lesi osithandayo. Nangoba isinqumo osithathayo kungesakho sokuthi uyazakhela indlu yakho noma uthenga indlu esimile, bayaxwayiswa abathengi ukuthi becabangisise kahle, njengoba ukuthenga ikhaya kuyinto ebizayo futhi akusona isikweletu ungavele uphume nje kalula kusona. Kumele wenze isiqiniseko sokuthi unalo lonke ulwazi olidingayo ngaphambi kokuthi uthathe isinqumo. Unompumelelo Mthethwa, Yilungelo Lakho, eGoli.
Siyabonga kakhulu ngalo mbiko siwenzelwe nguNompumelelo Mthethwa. Now to discuss this further about the pros and cons of building your own house as opposed to buying an existing one. Let's extend a very warm welcome to property analyst Mr. Jacques du Toit. Samgele no says Helen Paleng yena ongummeli. Ladies and gentlemen, so good to have you in studio with me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, let's start with you, Jacques. I know you're a property analyst, but just for the benefit of our viewers, explain to them what it is that you do.
Well, I look at the property market, the property industry, price trends, building trends from also an economic point of view, the impact of that on the economy, economic factors impacting the residential property market, and also the consumer, because it is in the end the consumer that buys property. So broader market environment and trends, also macroeconomic trends, impact the consumer, which will then eventually have an impact into the property market.
All right, sis Helen, wena usichazele siyezokuthi usebenza kabanzi ngeindaba zamabond nama-transfers ezindlu.
Thank you so much. As a conveyancer, I specialize in the transfer of properties and also the registration of bonds is one of the things that conveyancers
Ungasichazela
do.
ngesintu sis.
Registration of bonds relates to where a person gets funding from the bank, and the bank appointing a person of my caliber to register the bond.
Okay.
And also the cancellation of the bond, where the seller sold the property that was bonded, and that bond being having to be cancelled. So it's a cancellation of bonds, registration of bonds, and the transfer of property from one person from A to B. That is what we do.
All right. So, Jacques, the bulk of our inserts was different views from people, you know, and perceptions that they have about property. What do you make of those views? Are people still misinformed about really whether buying or building a house is cheaper?
Well, I believe in the end it comes down to their own preference. There are obviously a lot of advantages and disadvantages to building or either
and we're
building,
going to talk about those.
Yeah, and an existing property. So I think to some extent people have their own perceptions, and obviously maybe those perceptions were tested in the market before, that they maybe had a bad experience or a good experience. At some stage in time.
But Jacques, why do people think it's cheaper to build your own house than buying an existing one?
Well, yeah, that is not an easy question, because if you look at trends and statistics over time,
it used to be.
There is a massive difference. You know, in terms of our own calculations, in the first quarter of last year, we measured that there is a 23% difference between a new house price and the price of an existing property, when existing property was 23% cheaper. And if you look at what is actually driving the building costs, I had a look over the past 10 years, around about 8.5% on average increase per annum, while inflation was 5.5%. So building costs, in most instances, above the average consumer price index. Over a 10-year period, that gap is even wider, more. There's a bigger gap. So I think that is one of the reasons why there is such a big difference eventually over time between the price of existing property and building your own property.
Mrs. Helen, when it's in.
From a conveyancing point of view, buying an existing house or building your own house, it doesn't make any difference in terms of the transfer costs. All I can say is that there'll always be transfer costs. Because if ever you
Is
buy...
this included in a bond? Because I think a lot of people take up a bond from the bank and it's 150,000, let's just say. They don't think about the transfer costs. Would that be included in the bond?
No, it wouldn't sometimes.
So they need to think about such costs.
Yeah, those are the hidden costs that people need to be aware of.
And how much are we looking at for a transfer?
No, it depends on the value of the property. It's not like a hard and fast amount.
Okay.
It depends on the value because they vary. If ever the property is 100,000, obviously it will be lower. And if the property is high, obviously it will be high. But there's recommended tariffs from the Law Society for the transfer costs and the bond registration costs. And the cancellation costs, if ever there's a bond.
Look, tell us more about, many people don't know much about transfer costs and other related costs that we've just been talking about, but give us a clearer picture of what a home buyer, an aspiring home buyer should expect when thinking about buying a house.
Okay. When we talk about transfer costs, we are talking about costs that will be borne by the buyer. Right? A lot of times, the buyer is the one that has to pay the transfer costs.
This is after the bond has been approved now?
After the bond has been approved. And if ever the buyer obtained a bond from the bank, then obviously there will be bond registration costs that the buyer would have to pay, including the transfer costs. That is if ever the funding comes from the bank. The bond registration costs will be applicable. And again, if ever there's no bond, obviously, let's say, for instance, it's a cash buyer. You have money, you don't have to go to the bank to request any funding of the property. Then you are only faced with transfer costs.
Okay.
And again, we have other costs like the transfer duty. Tax that is leviable by the South African Revenue Services.
What is it for?
It's a tax that is levied when property is transferred from one person to the other.
Okay.
So that is called, it's a duty, it's called transfer duty tax. And it's also calculated depending on the amounts. There's always exemptions depending on the value of the property, of course.
Absolutely. And also the area where the property is, I suppose, also counts.
The area, not as such.
Not really.
It has no bearing on the area.
Okay.
It's only on the value.
Of the
so there's a
property
certain
itself.
threshold, yeah.
Okay.
So you get exemptions. I think it was around 650, from 650,000.
Yeah, it's around about 750,000.
750
Yeah,
now.
750 currently.
My goodness.
So that is totally exempted. No transfer costs then payable on a property up to 750,000.
Up to 750. It used to be 650 years. So now, obviously, it has been increased to 750. So if ever you buy a property that is less than 750 as an individual, there is no transfer duty tax leviable. So you will get an exemption. And from 750,000, that is when the transaction would attract transfer duty.
All right, let's leave it there for now. It's getting really hot. Sebeas Putumis about Masio Koki Kolet Zetu ngaindawo mbukeli. Sakwamukela futhi mbukeli lalela namhlanje sixoxa ngenkulu indaba le yini okumele uyenze ukuthenga indlu eyakhiwe noma wena uzakhela umazakhele wakho sesivulileke ingcingo manje shesha usithinte ku 0117146918 noma 7146919 ungasithumela i-email ku consumer@sabc.co.za alternatively usithole lapha ku Facebook na ku Twitter which is exactly where I'm going now ngifuna ukuzuthi nithini lapha ku Facebook. All right, uMarine Zethi Qwemesha uthi uzakhele indlu kuphi umhlaba asinawo singama Afrika. Sinazo KB Snairo uthi better to buy it not ukuyakha because it's a long process. Mna I prefer izinto ezisheshayo. All right, uLungelo Zondia uthi building your own house from scratch is better because that house will be new and you'll have no problem, while buying already built may cause you some problems that may have the previous owner to sell it. Thank you so much. Last but not least for now, Tiamo Tlabanyane uthi building your own home from scratch is a lot of a hassle and money. It demands a lot of things. So buying a fully built house is much easier and less costly, even though it has its disadvantages. Jacques, what do you think about those different views?
Well, I think those views are very much valid, you know. Maybe it is because of past experience, but building your own home, obviously everything will be new. You can maybe choose the finishes.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
can put the property in a certain position on a plot or whatever. But then if you buy off plan, you would not know what will be the quality in the end. So there are uncertainties. And many times, if you budget, say 150 or 200,000 to build this property, it can escalate to 250 or 300,000. And that can have a massive financial implication.
Helen, what do you think when ucabanga ukuthi abantu emakhaya ba-informed, well informed?
I would say there's ways to deal with a property that you bought, an existing property. If ever the issue or the concern is the defects that maybe can come out after the property has been bought, the measures that I think our consumers should be looking into are to make inspections and consider the defects, identify those specific defects to be included in their deed of sale. You know, as conditions, for example, if ever I'm buying a property from you that is existing, then there are certain reasonable steps that you can take to ensure that whatever negative things that come out of the property are already addressed. Like for instance, you find that, you know, people get excited sometimes.
Yes,
you see a property.
I'm buying a house, I'm going to be a homeowner.
Yes, maybe get an inspector home to come and check, for example, I'm just giving an example, somebody that has the expertise to be able to see the things that you as a person cannot be able to identify with your naked eye, like those the latent defects that one cannot be able to identify because you are not in that field. Get people that know to come and check if ever there's anything of concern, anything that you can make a condition in the deed of sale, a condition, I mean, you agree with the seller that, you know what, there's this issue that we identified. How about reducing the purchase price? Or how about you attending to these defects, making sure that they are resolved
So
before?
there's serious negotiation that can take place. Then hold on, lady and gentlemen, I have to take uSiyamthanda. Siyamthanda, sorry ukubambisa olayinini. Maniyashisa indaba la studio, siyakubingelela umbuzo noma umbono.
Hello, Sisi.
Hello, sis.
I just heard Sisi there are no transfer costs for Indlu that cost less than 650,000 last year, but you get it 715. My mom bought a house for 2012, and it was 550,000 rand, but she paid transfer costs. So why is that?
All right, Umzwile, sis. Did you hear that?
In 2012,
Yes,
her
she
mom
bought a
bought
house.
a house.
Yes.
And then she says there was transfer duty.
Yes.
What I can say is that transfer duty exemption gets increased on a yearly basis. It gets increased on a yearly basis. So where we are now, like we indicated, an exemption is increased to 750,000.
Yes,
So
yes.
when we do the application to SARS for the property of that value, especially if ever it's a primary residence, then you should be able to get that exemption in terms of the Transfer Duty Act. So I don't know how it happened that there was transfer duty payable, unless if maybe in 2012, she said, the exemption was less than the amount that she bought it for. I cannot be able to
But
remember.
can she contact you maybe to try and, fizzle out what the problem was there, Sis Helen? Can she contact you? Where can she go for more information?
The person that did the transfer maybe will be able to explain, because remember, when we do the transfer duty application, is the transferring attorney the person that was actually doing the transfer.
Yes, yes.
So he or she should be able to draw the file and be able to see exactly what transpired.
All right. What do you think, Sean?
No, absolutely. 2012, I think the exemption was 600,000. It is currently 750,000. So if you buy a property of 850,000 at this stage, the first 750,000 will be deducted, and then you'll pay transfer duty on the next, or the additional 100,000. But there should not be any transfer duty payable for any property, either residential or commercial, until 750,000. That is the transfer duty amendment that was given through last year already by the Minister of Finance. There was no change this year, but there is no uncertainty about that. No transfer duty payable on any property up until 750,000.
All right.
Either commercial, residential, new or old property whatsoever.
All right, I hope niyakuzwa-ke lokho babukeli nifunde yazi ama-documents enu mebenilethela before niwasayine. It's time for another quick ad break. Hamba ulanda ipeni nephepha uzobhala yonke information esikupha yona namhlanje. Asihlangane emva kwalokho. Welcome back to Yilungelo Lakho here on Mzansi for sure. My guests today are property analyst Mr. Jacques Dutoy and Sis Helen Paleng yena ongummeli osebenza ngezamabond ezindlu. You want to ask them questions on the pros and cons of buying or building a house? Our lines are now open. The numbers will be on your screen shortly. Leah from Limpopo siyakwamukela futhi sisi ohlelweni umbuzo noma umbono.
Hello, Helen.
Siyaphila sisi wami, sicela usibuze umbuzo noma ubeke umbono.
Helen, are you?
Yes, Leah, can you hear us?
Yes. Should I have to tell you my problem?
Yes, please, quickly.
Yes, Helen, I'm a little bit out to your topic, but my sister bought a house 3 years ago and she's not staying in the house. But
Leah, ngicela wehlise radio yakho sithando sami,
Can you give
i-TV
me
yakho.
advice regarding that, please?
Sis Leah, ngicela wehlise umabonakude wakho sithando sami, asikhona ukuzwa kahle bese uqala phansi usibuza umbuzo futhi.
I don't hear what you are saying.
Ngithi ngicela wehlise volume. Can you please turn down your TV set volume so that we can communicate?
Yes, I can hear you clearly now.
All right, sis wami. All right, please ask that question again.
I'm saying, Helen, my sister, she bought a house 3 years ago, and she's not staying in the house, but she keep on paying the house. What advice can you give me? Because she bought the house from the agents in Soweto.
Why is she not staying in the house?
What advice can you give me?
Why is she not staying?
Because the people, they don't want to move out of the house.
Oh, the people don't want to move out of the house. Okay, thank you so much, Leah, for that question. Is this a common thing that you come across?
Yes, no,
Let's start with you, Helen.
Thank you so much for the question. The issue here is that you have to pay for the house because you own the house. The transfer has actually taken place. So what I can advise the listener is that the only remedy that the sister has is to go to an attorney and make an application for eviction, because that is the only way that she can be able to get people out of that house. So the court will order, if ever she approaches the court through an attorney, the court will order that the people be evicted out of the house. But there's no other remedy available that is there except for following the proper procedure of approaching the courts for an eviction application.
Unfortunately, that can be a lengthy process and also a costly process.
One, I'm sure.
So that situation one should also take into account. But it is a difficult situation normally.
Is this something you deal with on? You've seen a lot, Jacques, in terms of complaints.
Yes, I think it is quite common that you find that doesn't matter where this property is. It happened all over the place.
You know, we're going to come back to a related question, but let's have a look at some Facebook messages that have come through now. Kutalo Stanop says, Alicia, the advantage of building a house, you are much likely to get what you want, as Jacques said in the beginning, and the disadvantage is the higher cost and, of course, longer time frame. Spesihle Oscar Kubula says, Alicia, it's better to buy and not to build because ukuyaka kutata ixesha and also go expensive than uba uyaka. Thank you so much, Spesihle. Temba Zizi Jama says, I think it's very wise to buy the existing house than starting from scratch. Remember, building material nowadays is too expensive and you also need to pay a bricklayer from Orlando East. Now, this is what brings me to my next question, Jacques. People are saying when you're buying off-plan, what kind of complaints have you dealt with in terms of people complaining about the developers taking forever, delays, and you know, at the end of the day, they're not getting what they signed up for at the end of the day?
It is quite possible, you know, sometimes there are delays in terms of even the weather that can play a role. It makes a difference at what time of the year you build. Maybe delays in terms of not getting the building material that you need for building the property. There can be various delays and whatever. And in the end, it can take much longer. And in the end, if it is taking much longer, the cost of building materials can go up in the meantime, and then you go over budget. So it can have a financial impact as well in the end, which makes it then very difficult for the property owner, because he wants to see this project through as soon as possible. He lands up with time delays, he lands up with higher cost, and it has a negative impact on his whole view of this whole experience in the end.
Of building the house.
Yes.
Says Helen Tinwin, what would you advise people? I mean, we've heard serious stories about those property developers and constructors duping consumers and not necessarily delivering substandard work. Example, the collapse in the Gulf Estate last year. I mean, such things.
Unfortunately, that is the reality of having to buy a house that is being built from scratch, as opposed to buying an existing property. But I would say, even if you buy off-plan, like you said, there will always be those situations where you discover that there are some defects. That is, it will always be there. Whether you buy it from a developer or you buy a piece of land and a land that somebody has to come and develop, there'll always be those situations where you pick up certain structural defects. So it's not guaranteed that if ever you buy a piece of land which you develop, there won't be any issues. There'll always be issues.
I think it is also maybe important for the listeners and the viewers to know that if they deal with a contractor or a building or a developer, that these people are registered, or the companies are registered with the NHBRC. Because in terms of a roof, you've got a 12-month warranty or guarantee. If there are any defects, the contractor will have to fix that. On the structure itself, it is a 5-year period.
It's like a registered service provider,
Absolutely.
basically.
So make sure that you deal with somebody that is registered, because that company will then have a sort of a history of providing good work and providing good building.
I was about to ask that, but don't those consultants actually now, you know, like land surveyors, quantity surveyors, also cost more?
They do.
They do.
Yes, no, they are professionals.
They're
They will come at a
So
fee.
you must think about those things when you're buying,
Absolutely.
because at the end of the day, it's your benefit.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you'd have to have those people on board. And the other thing is to cap some of the things to protect yourself as a consumer. When you enter into that agreement, make sure that, you know, your agreement with the developer is watertight, in that it will be able to cover you for any negative eventualities. So it's important to always make sure that you go to an attorney, maybe to review the contract that has been drafted between yourself and the contractor, so that things like retainers can also be factored into that contract to make sure that the consumer is protected. So that is what makes the whole thing to be expensive, because remember, when you start going that route and having to get more professionals on board to make sure that they do the checks and balances of the structure, then it becomes more costly, which is what Yak was saying, that you know, building your own house is going to be more costly than buying an existing property.
It's a scary thing. Asithatha ubusisiwe lapha eDavidton. Sisi siyakwamukela ohlelweni, umbuzo noma umbono?
Hello, sisi kunjani?
Siyaphila sithando sami. Qhubeka ngombuzo.
Ngiyaphila. Kusho ukuthi ngithenga indlu ye-RDP la.
Uthenga indlu?
Indlu lena ye-RDP bathi ayikakaphumi amaphepha. But already imali sengiyibhadalile, bangitshele sengiyibhadalile. Bathi khale imali yakhona amaphepha wakhona asazophuma.
Uyithenge nini indlu ye-RDP sisi?
Ngithenge kuyo le nyanga le bengisagcwalisa amaform and then Monday bengitransfer imali ku-account.
Imali engakanani mhlawumbe osuyisipendile if ungasabi ukuthi usitshele?
Ibe 280,000.
280,000. Bathi bawobani? Bathi labantu othenga kubona bawobani? Abantu bakuphi mhlawumbe ikhampani ethize or abantu ba-government?
Yilaba bama-agent.
Abama-agent. Okay, sithando sami. Sicela ulalele lapho kumabona kude nesisi wami sizozama ukukutholela i-solution. All right, we're going to hold it there for now. Ngathi siyashesha ngempela isikhathi namhlanje mbukeli, siyaqhubeka after this short break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Mbukeli, khumbula ukuthi izingcingo zethu zisavuliwe. Ungasishayela ucingo la ku 011-714-6918, alternatively 714-6919, or email us your views to consumer@sabc.co.za, or go to our Facebook page and tick like. Alternatively, follow us on Twitter. Now, we had a very strange call before the ad break, and Jacques, I see you smiling. Why are people selling RDP houses? Isn't it that you're supposed to apply for it and there's a waiting list?
Yes, no, for sure. That is the case. And as far as I know, if you got an RDP property, you have to keep it for a certain period before you can transact in it. I don't know if there are specific, I believe there are specific rules applying to RDP property. It is not the normal property market where people can buy and sell. It is totally different from the normal property market.
What do you know, Ngaloko, Mrs. Helen?
Yes, that's true. In terms of the act that regulates those kind of properties, they are not supposed to be transferred until a certain period has been, like a certain period has lapsed. Usually you would find that the title deeds for the RDP, they've got a condition that says you are not allowed to transfer the property within a period of 8 years, and if the 8 years has lapsed, you have to get consent maybe from the Department of Housing. Okay. But now in this case, I think what the consumers should be aware of is that when you buy property, you need to make sure that the person that sells the property to you is the owner before you even exchange monies. You know, don't be in a rush to pay monies before you verify certain facts about the property. You can even go to the deeds office, maybe get a printout to see who the owner is. And I don't think the printout is that expensive, it's around 10 rands. And even get the copy of the title deed, not the original, because remember the original title deed would be in the safekeeping of the owner. So that information will assist you to be able to identify who you are dealing with.
So now Busisiwe is in this mess. Jacques, what alternatives does she have? Where can she go for recourse?
I think it is a very difficult situation.
Can she go to the police? I mean, she seems to know the agents. I mean, I'm sure she can identify them. Is it a police case? Yes. Can she go and report a case?
Exactly. That will depend on even how the exchange of the monies took place.
Sure.
Because remember, you have to have evidence in case this person turns around and say, I haven't received any money from you. You see. So those are the
proof, you've got a problem.
All right. Well, let's try and move on now. I hope sisibusisiwe uzwileke lapha eDavidson hamba ntokazi uhamba uyocomplain uvula icala in fact epolice station ukuthi naba abantu bekudayisela indlu yeRDP. Izindlu zama-RDP ziphiwa ugovernment bakithi. It's not ukuthi umuntu uyayithenga and 280,000 rand. That's an exorbitant amount. Let's take a call on the line. Sakwamukela ohlelweni sicela usho igama lakho bhuti. Makhuzu, siyakwamukela ohlelweni Yilungelo Lakho, umbuzo noma umbono.
Ngilalela ma.
Makhuzu, yebo bhuti, qhubeka usibuza umbuzo nsizwa.
Oh, la ngifuna ukwazi ngoba nomuzi lapha eOrlando kwakuwasekhaya. Manje kwaku 2008 unyaka. Sabizwa lapha ku housing division nomfowethu. Masifika lapha basho ukuthi manje lo muzi siwenza njani ngoba it's a joint property. Ngathi ke mina ke ngoba yimina engimdala umkhulu. Ngathi khona ku hearing, sasi ku hearing. Ngathi mina ke lo muzi kungcono ke kuzawuhlala umfowethu la awugade lo muzi until such time mase decide ke ukuhlukanisa sibe sesiyawudayisa ngithola kwami naye athole kwakhe. Babuza ke kuyena ku hearing njengoba mina ngikhulumile ngathi kungahlala yena. Naye wathi usho kona lokho okukhulunywa umfowabo omdala kuzo ayisho ukuthi mina mkhulu okusho yini.
Yebo baba.
Ku hearing.
Manje inkinga ikuphi baba?
Kanjalo. Manje sengiyathika manje. Sengiyazi ukuthi sowakhile lapha kulomuzi wakhe igarage. Wakhe indlu yeRDP kune jardini. Uqashisa abantu.
Okay.
Une title lakhe, title la lo muzi lila kimi khona la ngikhuluma khona.
Okay baba. All right baba siyabonga kakhulu. Uyayizwa indaba yakhe sis Helen. All right, basically he says they had a joint house, the family passed away, so as the elder brother he was in charge of the property. During a hearing he nominated his younger brother to stay in the house, upon which in 2008 when he decided to come and sell the house, the brother had constructed new other properties on the property. He's got tenants, subtenants on the property, and now they're fighting over the dispute of the deeds.
Yeah, this is
yours, isn't it?
Yeah.
It seems like it is a legal
Yeah, it's
issue.
more, yeah.
No, the question that one has to ask is in whose name is the property registered? Despite the fact that there was an agreement that one has to remain in the property. Because if ever he is one of the joint owners of the property.
He is one of the joint owners. He was the eldest brother.
Even on the title deed.
He says he's still got the title deed with him, but this guy won't let him sell the property because now he's built garages, he's built other existing properties within that house. There's even an RDP
so
structure in there.
So they are both joint owners of the property.
The brother was just elected to stay in the house while they jointly decided on when to sell the house. So when he came back to come and say, okay, brother, you can move out now. We've decided we're going to sell the house. The brother doesn't want to move because there's new structures on the property.
Okay. But now, what I want to be sure of, are they all joint owners of the property? Do you understand, Jack?
Yes. It seems like that the brother only got consent from the elder brother.
The elder brother.
That he can stay there.
Yes.
But it seems like he is not
the
joint
owner.
owner.
He's not the owner.
Okay. If he's not the owner, then it's simple. Because then it means if ever he doesn't want to vacate the property, then he is entitled to approach the courts because the court is the only one that can evict.
Okay.
He cannot illegally evict him out of the property. So it's better if ever he makes an application to court through the attorneys for the court to grant an order that he should be evicted out of the property.
All right. So I gave Babu Makhubu, let's hope ukuthi uzwile lapho bathi wena kumele uhambe uye enkantolo ngoba usayiphethe leyo title deed yalowo muzi. Kuyasho ukuthi uwena iowner leyo yindlu. So hamba baba uyothola usizo enkantolo. Thenjiwe siyakwamukela sisohlelweni qaba nje sesiso ekhefini sithando sami.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, Uthenjo Khulumayo, what happened is I bought a house, I keep it deposit.
Yebo sis, nini?
And then after 2 years, kuzokwenza ama-process, the seller decided to akasathengisi. But now, I'm a lawyer now, that's difficult with banginikeza imali yami, but now, is this allowed ukuthi umuntu athi uyathengisa, and then after the agreement eseniyisayinile, udecide ukungasathengisi?
Oh, ubesesayinile yonke into sisi wami?
Ngikhiphe i-deposit, ngabhadala ama-cost.
Which cost did you pay, Sithanda sami? Ama-transfers, mhlampe ungasichazela kabanzi?
Transfer cost ne-transfer, but the transfer duties and then plus ama-cost. So it went to like the full amount. Well, they had one amount for that, but by it cost plus the transfer.
Oh, okay, cost plus transfer. Sisithenjiwe hlala nje kanjalo sizo-address umbuzo wakho emva kwaleli khefu. Well, we'll continue that after this final ad break. Siyabuya siqoqe uhlelo. All right, welcome back. We'll now take our final caller ngoba sesizovalelisa. Phuthuma uma usafuna usizo ku-Jacques noma uHelen. Jack Western Cape sakwamukela bhuti uthi qaba nje sibekele indaba yakho.
Okay, sisalisha yabona sisi ngicela ukona nosisi kusiselela ukuthi if ever they tell indlu and then after we sign a contract then a seller decided not to sell the property anymore but already paid ama transfer fees. But when you imali deduct kumina, is it possible ukuthi lethola kanjani imali yami?
Jack by deduct. But Jack by deduct le mali kuwena.
Imali deduct deduct kumina imali already.
Okay, Putwam. All right, it's a similar question basically to our previous caller. The seller decides to change their mind, but they're not refunding the people their monies.
No, I think that's a breach of contract.
Yeah,
it's a legal contract.
It's a legal contract. Once you sign a deed of sale, the problem that we always have is that we don't know the underlying agreement, whether it was done properly, because sometimes you find that we just exchange money.
Yes.
I don't know the full facts, but if ever it was based on a deed of sale, a proper contract where it is clear that these are your obligations, these are my rights, then it's easy for you, to base your argument on that particular contract. So in this instance, if ever a contract was signed, and obviously it looks like the attorneys were involved in this whole thing, hence the deposit was paid, then that would be breach, like Yak indicates. It's a breach of contract, and they've got a right to request specific performance to say, I performed in terms of the contract, I paid the deposit, and you are supposed to perform in terms of the contract. Because remember, the seller has to cooperate so that the transfer papers can be effectively be prepared by the attorney. So the seller should not make it difficult for the transaction to proceed.
Absolutely.
Look, I just want to get this clear, Jacques. I mean, where do then people go when they have such grievances? Is there a body that they can generally go to, or it has to be directly through the courts?
Well, they will most probably have to go to an attorney because it is a binding contract.
Yes.
The buyer signs first and then the seller signs last.
Yes.
And the moment that happens, it is a binding contract. And I think the only option most probably here is to take the legal route to try and solve this issue.
And to wrap up, what should be the person's first thoughts, or a hit list of saying, okay, this is what you need to do before you go into buying a house? Very quickly, Jacques.
Yeah, make sure that you know what you want, that you deal with professional people that are registered estate agents, registered building contract developer, and those guys, and make sure that the process via the attorney and the conveyancer is progressing, and that you know what all the steps are.
All right.
And you only pay money to the conveyancer.
All right, you only pay money to Usis Helen. Thank you so much, Jacques and Helen there. Wow, kanjalo nje Mbukeli ihora seliphelile, asithemba ukuthi kodwa kuningi okufundile namhlanje. Mbukeli, ungasibhalela phela uma unembono nokuthi wena ufuna sikhulume ngani la ohleleni olwenu phela lolu hlelo, so ungesabi. Sizobe sila next week Friday sikuphathele esinye isiqephu salo Yilungelo Lakho. Ngingu-Alisha Ntombi yakajali. This is SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. Make wise decisions. Bye-bye.